Hello, all new employees. Welcome to ProSun. On behalf of the company, I would like to welcome you to the new employee orientation. Today, we'll be covering the company background, your job checklist and work schedule, result blocks and compensation, the employee handbook, the quality policy overview, housekeeping and safety requirements, and your job-specific training. ProSun is a privately owned tanning, beauty, and wellness equipment manufacturer located in St. Petersburg, Florida. Originally founded in 1979, we are now the largest tanning bed manufacturer in the United States and ship units throughout the entirety of the United States and Canada. Being family-owned, ProSun is very community-minded. In 2020, we partnered with Nellis County Schools to launch a new venture, the Youth Career Development Program. I would now like everybody to take a moment and pause to read this message from the CEO. ProSun's mission is to manufacture superior products and provide exceptional customer service, creating sustainable systems to enable continuous improvement, accountability, and employee development. ProSun as a company is a huge believer in strategic planning and adhering to that plan. A company will only succeed if each employee is giving their best to achieve the laid out plan. In order to navigate an employee through multiple tasks and responsibilities, task prioritization is important. This can be achieved via following the provided task list. An employee task list is a documented series of duties that an employee must complete. It offers the employees details of what needs to be done and how to go about completing those tasks. The job checklist is a summary of all company quality procedures that an employee needs to follow every day in order to complete their tasks. You will get both a task list and a job checklist every day. The task list documents the targeted minutes it takes for you to complete a certain task. You must fill in if you completed the task or not, your start time, your end time, and the actual minutes it took you to complete said task. The job checklist has a more overall viewpoint, and you only mark yes or no. At ProSun, career progression is broken down into result blocks. Result blocks are clearly defined business procedures that employees must learn and demonstrate proficiency in before being signed off on. Similar to Lego sets, result blocks have small numbers of components that are easy to complete, while others may have more pieces and are harder to master. But all have a clearly defined business procedure with an end goal and objective measurement of success. Each result block has a targeted number of hours to learn, master, and demonstrate proficiency in. Each result block also has a pay increase associated with it. There are currently 10 result blocks, each taking anywhere from 15 to 120 hours to complete, and each with a pay increase varying between 50 cents and $1 per hour, meaning that a student can progress up to $20 an hour. Below is the SunDream result block. The SunDream result block should take 35 to 40 hours to complete and comes with $1 an hour pay increase upon successful completion. Each business process has a documented work instruction manual showing all the detailed steps to completing each task. Each employee will receive an employee handbook with the following information inside of it. It is highly recommended that an employee reads this handbook within the first week of their start date employment. It is the policy of ProSun International LLC to offer our clients high-quality products and service in order to have happy and satisfied customers. ProSun is committed to complying with all applicable regulatory requirements. ProSun is focused on continual improvement of the effectiveness of our quality system that allows our employees to do their jobs right the first time and every time. Each business process has a documented work instruction manual showing all the detailed steps to completing the task. You must always follow OSHA and ProSun safety guidelines. This includes standard operating procedures, housekeeping, wearing shoes, knowing your emergency contacts, eye and eye wash safety, the location of escape routes, fire extinguishers, and the first aid kits, as well as any extra safety rules that may apply to you based on your job or the time you are working. Housekeeping is a core reflection of our attention to detail as a company. If we cannot keep our house clean, how can we profess to manufacture the highest quality tanning beds? Clean in ProSun terms must be taken in the context that we are classified federally as a Class II medical device manufacturer. Therefore, clean means absolutely spotless every day. To maintain FDA and ProSun requirements, every employee must clean their own area as well as the area they were assigned to do. In the case of an accident, begin by getting the injured person taken care of. If an ambulance is required, call 911 and tell them you have a work injury at ProSun 2442 23rd Street North, St. Petersburg. Make sure to get the name and address of the hospital that the injured is being taken to. If it does not require an ambulance, make the determination of whether you need to go to the emergency room, which is located at this address, or if you can go to urgent care, which is located at this address Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., or if it can be treated with first aid on site. The hospital, ER, or urgent care should be told it is a workers' compensation injury and provide Jody's contact information, which is listed below. Once the injured person is taken care of, contact your immediate supervisor and Jody at this number. Jody will notify insurance. Jim can be notified 24/7 by text and only needs to know the type of injury and employee name. Jody will then notify the employee's emergency contact of the injury, order the mandatory post-accident drug screen, update the OSHA 300 log, and conduct the accident investigation. Your eyes are very sensitive and need to be protected. If required, always wear face and eye protection. You should also not rub your eyes on the job because any particles on your hands or glove may enter and injure your eyes. Debris and dust may get blown into your eyes at the workplace where damage to your eyes will immediately incur. If this is to happen, you need to know how and where to properly treat your eyes. In the event particles enter your eye, it is important to stay calm, not panic, and calmly treat your eyes. Do not rub your eyes as this can cause further particles and damage to your eyes. Head to the nearest eye wash station for first aid treatment. You should familiarize yourself with how the eye wash station looks and how to operate it. The guidelines for treating your eyes in an emergency are on the eye wash stations and are listed in the next slide. The image shows an eye wash station. Each eye wash station has the guidelines for use on it. It has also been rewritten in this slide if you would like to take the time to pause and read it. There are 5 eye wash stations, 1 in the break room, 2 in the large production area, 1 in the small production area, and 1 in the metal shop. Aside from eye wash locations, you should also note the location of fire extinguishers as well as fire escape routes. This map is located around the warehouse and depicts locations in case of emergency or fire. As you can see, there are 3 exits and fire extinguishers in every room except the break room. Lastly, you should know the location of the emergency first aid boxes, of which there is 1 in the break room, 1 in the back hallway, and 1 in the metal shop. We will now take a few minutes for a quick walk through of the warehouse. You enter the production facility through the front hallway. On the left is the break room that contains a first aid kit and an eye wash station, as well as the restrooms. On the right are the offices. Taking the left at the end of the front hallway goes to the loading dock. The shipping and loading area is where ready units for shipping is stored and sent out, and where products are received. Returning to the front hallway, you can enter the large production area. This is the main production floor and is where final assembly and packaging takes place. There are 6 QC testing stations inside of the large production facility. Station 1 is connected to the front of the middle rack. Station 2 is on the left side of the room, and Station 3 is positioned in the front of the room. Then Station 4 is positioned in the middle of the room next to the tools. Stations 1 through 4 are all for 220 volts. Station 5 is in the back middle, and Station 6 is in the back left. Stations 5 and 6 are both for 120 volts. The large production area also contains a UPS station, which is for UPS orders and packaging. The large production facility also contains 2 of the eye wash stations. Leaving the large production facility goes to the back hallway. The back hallway is where cardboard pallets, wood pallets, and the boxes used for packages are stored. The back hallway also contains another first aid kit. This back area of the back hallway is always left open because it's where the forklifts are placed and charged. Directly across the large production facility and the back hallway is the small production facility. The small production facility is the wiring room where electrical components and sub-assemblies are completed. It also contains QC testing station 7, which is for 120 volts. The small production facility also contains an eye wash station. Leaving the small production area and going to the end of the back hallway, you enter the metal shop. The metal shop is for wiring and making the framing for tanning beds. There's also a first aid box and an eye wash station in the metal shop. Some of the metal parts used by ProSun are manufactured in the facility. This is made using the large machinery at the back of the metal shop. Finally, entering the back hallway once more, you can enter the storage area. On the right side of the storage area is where the lamps for the tanning beds are stored. On the left side of the storage facility is where units and old parts stock is stored. Depending on your job and/or shift, you may have additional safety rules apply to you. You will be told if you have any extra safety guidelines with your job at or before work. Some common extra safety requirements are to work in pairs when there are no managers in the building, so that if someone is injured, the other can call for emergency contacts. You may also need to wear specified equipment during certain actions, such as UV glasses while testing tanning beds. Make sure you are aware of any extra safety precautions you must take. This is the end of the general orientation, and we will begin the job-specific training. Issue reports is how we handle non-conform issues such as production errors, customer returns, shipping damage, procedural issues, and quality checkpoints. The first type of issue report is for production damage. All materials that are damaged during the production process and cannot be used in a finished product must be processed by completing an issue report form. This includes items that can be sent for rework/repair and items for scrap. Begin the issue report by filling out your name and date. Then in your assembly checkoff list, find the business process heading you are working on and write this in the business process. In the responsible section, list the name of the person responsible for the damage, whether that is yourself or if it was done by someone in a prior step. Put the area as production. Then fill in the part number for the damaged part. This should be on the assembly checkoff list. If not, then look on the shelf to find the part number. If it is still not there, then you can list the part name. List the quantity of parts that were damaged. In the section for customer returns only, put non-applicable in the customer name and SO field. Then select the discrepancy type of production damage. In the description of discrepancy, you must clearly and legibly write what happened and how or why this happened. The person processing this form must have a clear understanding. You either scrapped it, which is when the part was damaged during production, and you threw it away after filling out the form, or requested for rework/repair, which is when a part gets damaged that could be salvaged. Then complete the form and put it on the testing area of the non-conform shelf with the form attached to it. Damaged parts are scrapped, but if a part is metal, ask the supervisor if the part is scrapped or can be repaired. If metal is scrapped, then keep it by the non-conforming shelf. Then submit clear pictures of the damaged parts as well as the clear image of your form. Finally, write any additional information you feel is important in the notes section. The next issue report is for production error. All issues that are found during the assembly process prior to a quality checkpoint should be recorded as production errors. Like the previous form, fill in the date, your name, and the business process, as well as the responsible person. In the area, you will select production. In the part number and quantity list, put not applicable, but the same for the customer returns only section. You will then select the discrepancy type of production error. Then in the description of discrepancy, provide a detailed description of the error that was found. Then for the immediate disposition, select whether this needs a request for rework/repair or whether it was corrected. The next type is processing issue reports for defective parts. Defective parts are all items that are found to be not working from the moment you take them off the shelf. Begin like before by filling in your name and date. In the business process, put not applicable. Put the same in the responsible section. In the area, select supply chain. Fill in the part number for the defective part, which should be on the assembly checkoff list, or look on the shelf location to find the part number. If you still cannot find the part, then list the part name. Then list the quantity of parts that were defective. In the section for customer returns only, put not applicable. Then select the discrepancy type of defective part. In the description of discrepancy, state how you found the part was defective. Then select the immediate disposition. This will be either scrap or return to vendor. Return to vendor includes all electronics such as boards, ballasts, and timers that need to go on the non-conforming shelf in the return to vendor section with the issue report form attached. Submit clear images of the parts that were damaged as well as a clear image of your form. The next type of issue reports are for low UV output, high UV output, and QC testing non-conformance. All issues related to these must be documented on an issue report form. Fill in your name, date, and business process. Then put not applicable in the responsible section. In the area, select production. Then fill in the part number and quantity. Then for part number and quantity, put not applicable. In the section for customer returns only, put not applicable in the customer's name and SO field. Then select the discrepancy type based on the error you are experiencing. Lower high UV output is when you get a UV reading outside of the range of the QC sheet and verify with your supervisor if a nonconform should be completed. QC test nonconformance is when a device you're working on fails a test such as high pot or grounding. Then in the description of discrepancy, state specifically what issue occurred. You then select the immediate disposition, which is a request for rework/repair, or if you corrected the issue yourself, bringing the product into conformance. The next issue report is for quality checkpoints. If you're completing a quality checkpoint review and the checkpoint has any failures, then you must fill out an issue report form for that business process portion. One issue report per quality checkpoint business process. You will then have the employee resolve the issue and verify that it has been corrected. Or the unit will be segregated from the production line and clearly marked as non-conforming product with a label. Begin by filling your name, date, and business process. The responsible person is the person who is completing that portion of the assembly process. In the area, select production, and then put not applicable for the part number and quantity. Put not applicable for customer returns and shipping damage only section as well. The discrepancy type is quality checkpoint. Then, for the description of discrepancy, clearly list any and all quality checkpoints that were failed. The immediate disposition will either be corrected if the employee corrects the issue, or request for a rework/repair if the employee cannot resolve the error and it needs to be done by another employee. The seventh type of issue report is procedural errors. This is when during review of paperwork or while supervising employees, it is found that procedure is not being followed and an issue report should be completed. This can be when the reviewing of paperwork is completed properly, following assembly guidelines in order, or any other procedural process. Begin by filling in your name and date, and then fill in the business process where the assembly checkoff list procedure was broken, or not applicable if it was not during a specific process. You will then put the person responsible for the error, and the area as production. Put not applicable for the part number and quantity, and customer returns and shipping damage only sections. For the description of discrepancy, clearly explain what procedure and which part of that procedure is broken. And then in the immediate disposition, determine what needs to be done based on the procedure that was broken. This includes requests for retesting when something needs to be retested, correct it if the employee or you is able to go back and resolve the error, or use as is if it's a small issue that can be overlooked. Next is processing issue reports for customer returns. For warehouse, if it is determined that a shipment is being received due to a customer return, then process this form for customer returns. Review the information on the label to see if there's any notifications for return to sender, incorrect address, or anything else. For warehouse, if it is determined that a shipment is being received due to a customer return, then process the form for customer returns. Begin by filling in your name and date, then putting not applicable for business process and responsible person. The area would be customer return. Then fill in the part numbers of the items being returned and their quantities. If there's more than one part, then list additional items and their quantities in their notes section. For customer returns and shipping damage only, list the customer name from shipping label and try to locate an SO number and/or service call number. If you cannot find this, list unavailable in that section. The discrepancy type is customer return. For description of discrepancy, clearly state what you found on the package that was the reason for the return. If there is no reason indicated, then state so. For immediate disposition, if the parts are still in their original package and new, then select Return to Inventory, and put the parts away after completing the form. Select Scrap if something was completely damaged and can no longer be used, and throw it away. Select Request for Testing if the return is for a board or electric timer that must be tested. Other electronics must be sent for testing if they have been opened and are not in their original package. Take pictures of the box, labels on the box, and contents inside and your form. And then in notes, list any additional parts that you cannot fit in the sections above. List serial numbers of board/timers that came back and other information you believe is important. If only one part came back and no serial numbers are needed, then this can be left blank. Customer returns of units not related to shipping damage must have the unit serial number listed on the notes section. The second to last type of issue report is for shipping damage. If a package returns to ProSun due to shipping damage, either because you're aware that it is back due to damage or because the package is clearly damaged upon return, then an issue report for shipping damage must be completed. Fill in the date and put your name in the Submitted By section. Then put Not Applicable in the Business Process and Responsible Person section. In the area, select Shipping Damage. Then in the Part Number and Quantity section, fill in the part numbers of the items being returned and their quantities. If there is more than one part, then list the additional items and their quantities in the Notes section. For the Customer Returns and Shipping Damage Only section, list the customer name from the shipping label and try to locate a SO and/or service call number. If you cannot find this, list unavailable in that section. For description of discrepancy, provide a clear statement of how the package is received back. Your statement should provide a clear guide to the person processing the form of what happened. Then for immediate disposition, select Scrap if the product was totally damaged and had to be thrown away, return to inventory if only the outer box was damaged and the contents were okay, or if it was a combination of some items being returned to inventory and scrapped, then select Scrap. Take pictures of the box, labels, contents inside the box, and your form. And for the notes, list any additional parts that cannot fit in the section above, or a serial number of board/timers that came back and any other information you believe is important. Shipping damage units must list a serial number in this section. The final type of processing issue reports is for supply chain. If there are any issues with supply chain departments such as receiving, loading, or processing shipments, then an issue report should be completed. Begin by filling in your name and date, then put Not Applicable in the business process. For the responsible person, either put the responsible person or Not Applicable if the issue is from a vendor. For the area, select Supply Chain. In the part number and quantity section, if this is an issue of a defective part from a vendor, then fill in the part numbers of the items being returned and their quantities. If there is more than one part number, then list additional items and their quantities in the notes section. For customer returns and shipping damage only, put Not Applicable in both sections. Then in the discrepancy type, select whether it is a defective part or procedural error. In the description of discrepancy, provide a clear statement of what happened and what was found. Then in immediate disposition, select either Scrap, Return for Testing, or Corrected. Then finally for pictures, take pictures of the box, label, contents inside the box, and your form. Once you have sent the pictures and completed the form, go to the printer in the production office and place the document in the top feeder. Select Scan the Network, followed by Non-Conform folder. If parts are scrapped or the issue report is not related to a part, then put the form on the quality engineer's desk. For scrap, your parts should be truly disposed of and not still laying around. Small parts in the trash, large parts in the dumpster, lamps in their designated areas. If your part is going to stay in the non-conforming area, then attach your form to the part and ensure that the part is in the correct spot. The non-conform shelf should only have items that are waited to be tested and items that are going back to vendor. It is not a holding area for parts waiting to be processed, as this should be done immediately by the person who discovered the defect. The top shelf is for test boards, the center is returned to vendor, and the bottom is pending testing. We will now discuss inspection and testing procedure. The purpose is to provide guidance on acceptance activities for all incoming material, including general receiving requirements, in-process testing, final testing, and record verification. Some terms you will see used is QAM, which stands for Quality Assurance Manager, NMR, which stands for Non-Conforming Material Report, ACPR, which stands for Authorized Company Purchasing Representative, and ASL, which stands for Approved Supplier List. It is the responsibility of every ProSun employee to monitor and verify that the quality of their work meets ProSun requirements. Moreover, the following specific responsibilities are established. The Quality Assurance Manager or their designee is responsible for ensuring that compliance to this procedure and maintaining an inspection and testing program that ensures that ProSun products meet the quality standards for intended use of each device. Any ProSun employee discovering defective material or work shall process that material or work per the disposition of non-conforming material procedure. QC inspection personnel are responsible for the final inspection and testing of ProSun devices and verifying that all required workmanship, performance, safety, dimensional, identification, and documentation requirements are verified or tested. Receiving of incoming materials from vendors that are approved on the ASL will be done by matching the items being received to the pending purchase order. Items received will go through the incoming material verification where a basic inspection is performed as described below, and the parts are placed in their designated areas. All incoming parts will be checked by the warehouse representative finding the purchase order for that supplier. If there is no pending purchase order, the warehouse representative will leave the items in the receiving area and notify their supervisor. Once the supplier is matched with the purchase order from the warehouse, representatives will check the part number and description on the PO box and ensure that these parts are being received. If there are any discrepancies, they will notify their supervisor. The warehouse representative will also verify the quantity received versus the quantity on the purchase order. If there are any issues with the shipment such as defective parts or shipping damage, they will process and issue a report and proceed per the disposition of non-conforming materials procedures. The warehouse representative will proceed to place the items in their designated locations. The purchase order and packaging slip from the supplier are scanned into the designated server folder for further processing in the SAP database. Receiving incoming materials from vendors on the ASL are listed as conditionally approved. Follow the same process as in the previous section but with additional required controls. The vendor may supply a certificate of conformance or certificate of analysis with the shipment. If a certificate is not submitted, then the materials must be tested per the sampling plan described in Attachment D. The results of the inspection will be marked on the purchase order by the warehouse representative. Attachment D is the guidelines for inspection sampling plan. Begin by identifying the lot or batch size, which is in Block 1. Then select the General Inspection Level code under Column 2. This is based off the lot or batch size. Then based on your General Inspection Level, take out the sample size and apply the AQL to accept or reject the lot or batch. For example, this means for a batch size of 10 pieces, B would be your General Inspection Level, and 3 is the sample size to be expected. You would accept the batch if 0 rejects is found in the 3 pieces measured, and reject the batch when 1 or more pieces are found. You will then sort the batch for 100% for rejects found. The supervisor will then determine whether testing of all items on the order is needed and will contact the vendor to take further actions. Materials that are received that are part of the finished device but will not be tested during in-process testing, such as metal frames or structural pieces, will have a designated sign in their location that will require the warehouse associate to perform testing prior to putting the part in inventory. The warehouse associate will perform the receiving process per the first part of Section 5, as well as perform a sampling testing based on the guidelines for the inspection sampling plan shown in Attachment D. The results of the inspection will be marked on the purchase order by the warehouse representative. Once the sampling testing has been completed, the warehouse representative will either move the materials in inventory if found to be accepted, or keep them in the receiving area and the paperwork showing the reason for rejection. Once the sampling testing has been completed, the warehouse representative will either move the materials into inventory if found to be accepted, or keep them in the receiving area with the paperwork showing the reason for rejection. If materials are rejected, they will notify the supervisor immediately. The purchase order and packaging slip will then be scanned into the designated folder on the server in order to be processed in SAP, and verify that all required information was completed. Mechanical assemblies are assembly of frames and covers that are part of the finished device. These components are verified during in-process testing as they are built to be specific sizes that will allow the device to properly fit together. The general mechanical assembly in-process inspection responsibilities are: covers, caps, reflectors, acrylics, and mounting hardware are to be properly located and checked for the correct fit, finish, location, mismatch, alignment, and free from damage. And fasteners are to be checked for proper installation, location, number, torque, and alignment. Holes and relief cuts are to be properly located and placed on by the assembly associate. All exposed metal surfaces or surfaces that carry wires are to be free from burrs or sharp corners. If the employee discovers a defective part or incorrectly assembles a unit, they will process that part or device per the disposition of non-conforming material procedures. In-process inspection and testing for electrical assembly. The assembly of wiring harnesses and other electrical components that are part of the finished device are tested during the assembly process and final QC inspection. The assembly of wiring harnesses and other electrical components that are part of the finished device are tested during the assembly process and final QC inspection. The sub-assemblies that are made from raw materials and/or other subcomponents are made from whether parts in the designated areas and that are placed in the finished sub-assembly area where they will wait to be tested in the device during in-process testing. The general electrical assembly in-process inspection responsibilities are: as a part of the normal electrical assembly process, the assembly associate shall make sure that any parts required come from their designated areas. Wiring is to be checked for correct and proper terminations, no exposed conductors, fraying, cuts, or broken connectors. Connectors will be checked for a snug fit and the absence of a tension on any line. Wiring is to be routed in the correct connectors used to prevent excessive bends that may weaken the insulator or overstress the conductor. All terminations are to be verified by an electrical assembly associate before releasing that part or device to final assembly and testing. If the employee discovers a defective part or incorrectly assembles an electrical connection, the associate will process that part as an incorrect assembly per the disposition of non-conforming material procedures. The final inspection and testing is performed when the finished device has all the required components and the device is then to be tested for its intended use. During this process, all device labeling is placed and verified. The QC inspector checks the units as follows. The ProSyn QC checkoff lists are completed by the QC inspector. The device is checked per the ProSyn QC checkoff list. At a minimum, the following checks are made. The finished canopy or bench assembly should not show distortion, gaps, or misalignment. All fans and bulbs are normal operation and proper orientation. All terminations and circuits are to be verified by having all panels of the unit connected to each other. The unit passes the high pot, timer, and UV exposure meter test. And all stickers and labels have been applied to the unit per the device labeling diagram. Progressively check off all inspections and operations on the ProSyn QC checkoff list as they are completed, and when all checks have been completed successfully, sign and date the sheet. If the inspector discovers a defect, they will process the device or component per the disposition of non-conforming material procedure. When a unit has been accepted by inspection per the procedure, that the assembly checkoff list is completed for that section, as well as a QC checkoff list which will be signed and dated by the inspector. The unit will be packaged per the assembly checkoff list, and all device labeling will be placed on the boxes to properly identify the device. The completed ProSyn QC checkoff list and assembly checkoff lists are put together and turned into the quality engineer or their designee. These documents make up the device history record. The quality engineer or their designee reviews and verifies the QC checkoff list for accuracy, compliance to UV requirements, and verifies that all paperwork in the DHR has been completed properly. Any inconsistencies that are found are processed on the issue report. Accuracy and compliance refer to items such as verifying that correct lamps are used for the model, amperage and voltage were checked and noted on paperwork, work order/production order on QC sheet matches the numbers on the assembly paperwork, and that the QC sheet is signed and dated. The quality engineer or their designee then signs and dates the QC checkoff list, followed by scanning all paperwork into the scan router for processing. The quality insurance manager or the designee reviews the QC checkoff list and reviews the documentation for accuracy, and then saves the file on the designated folder on the server by serial number and date. The production order is processed in the SAP database to assign the serial number, and then this will be assigned to the customer account once the device is shipped. We will now move on to the product identification procedure. The purpose of the product identification procedure is to establish the procedure for identifying items and products at all stages of receipt, production, delivery, and installation. That will prevent mix-ups as required by the 21 CFR 820.60. The production manager or his designee is responsible for implementing and maintaining the system to easily and correctly ensure that ProSyn products and their components are properly identified from receipts to installation. The system shall provide for the identification of components, parts, assemblies, and finished units. The protocol for serialized unit numbers is defined for complete BES and their related documentation. Product is received by the production manager or his designee. Each product received is matched with the purchase order and invoice to ensure the correct amount was received. If any damage or parts are found to be out of specification, they are processed via the non-conforming material procedure. Paperwork is submitted to the accounting department for final processing, verification of pricing, and payment. Unless provided for in a specific circumstance, the method of product identification for all products, regardless of type, is via defined stock location. Each assigned stock location for parts and sub-assemblies has a rack, bin, or box with the part number and/or simple part physically attached to the assigned rack location. Unless provided for in a specific circumstance, the method of product identification for finished stock items in the warehouse, regardless of type, is via defined stock locations and product markings. Model and part identification are provided on the OEM containers or by the ProSun standard product markings. Each unit will have a unique serial number. Component parts are primarily catalog items received from distributors. These components are parts such as switches, relays, connectors, and wires, which have the OEM part number marking on the parts of the packaging. Such parts are ordered by their vendor catalog/part number and are received as such. When parts are received, they are checked during the production process and final inspection. ProSun Assembly Associates are to verify that the part number/description on the work order or pickup list match the job they are working on. If any questions exist, the production manager or his designee are to be notified and should refer to the ProSun engineering drawings and/or purchasing for verification of identification of purchase components. Fabricated parts are primarily engineered items received from Hapro. These components are parts such as reflectors, frames, assemblies, stamp parts, covers, wiring harnesses, or bed assemblies, which have the OEM and ProSun part number marking on the parts or the packaging. Such parts are ordered by the ProSun model/part numbers and are received as such. When parts are received, they are checked during the production and final quality control procedure. ProSun Assembly Associates are to verify that the part number/description on the work order or pick list match for the job they are working on. If any questions exist, the production manager or his designee are to be notified and should refer to the ProSun engineering drawings and/or purchasing for verification of identification of purchasing components. Assembly personnel complete manufacturing operations using assembly worksheets that stay with the unit as it goes through the production process. As the units are processed down the assembly line, each subsequent assembler shall verify that they have the correct materials per the assembly worksheet. When the unit has completed assembly, the unit is presented to quality control for inspection and testing as a finished unit. The manufacturing worksheet is presented to QC with the unit. During the quality control process, the quality control checklist is completed and the unit is given a unique serial number for identification. Equipment is considered complete once it has passed the quality control checkpoint and has been assigned a unique serial number. The serial number is kept with the quality control checklist and is processed in SAP for proper record keeping. Once the unit is ready for shipping, ProSun employees place the proper shipment labels identifying the customer name and address, equipment name labels, and tracking number on the outside packaging. Once equipment leaves ProSun, it is identified by the unique serial number which is placed on the sticker on the unit and processed in our SAP database. Once the equipment is shipped, the serial number is assigned to a specific customer during the invoicing process, ensuring that the specific serial number cannot be given to another customer. Paperwork is verified by the production manager and accounting department for their designees. Parts or products that are considered unique or specific, such as boards, are serialized in our system and require a serial number assigned prior to invoicing. We will now begin the presentation on electrostatic discharge control, or ESD. This will be followed by ProSun's electrostatic control procedure. We will go over what ESD is, why we deal with ESD, static charge generation, what causes ESD, and how to prevent ESD damage. ESD, or electrostatic discharge, is a rapid spontaneous transfer of electrostatic charge induced by a high electrostatic field. Usually the charge flows through a spark between two conductive bodies at different electrostatic potentials as they approach one another. Many people have experienced static electricity and shocks or electrical discharge when touching a metal doorknob after walking across a carpeted floor or after sliding across a car seat. ESD is one of the most serious problems facing the electronic industry today. ESD affects production yields, manufacturing costs, as well as product quality and reliability. The cost of damaged devices range from only a few cents for a simple diode to thousands of dollars for complex integrated circuits. It is unlikely that any company which ignores static control will be able to manufacture and deliver undamaged electronic parts successfully. ESD can change the electrical characteristics of a semiconductor device, degrading or destroying it. ESD may also upset the normal operation of electronic system, causing equipment malfunction or failure. There are two failures ESD can cause inside of a product. Catastrophic failure is when an electronic device is exposed to an ESD event and no longer functions. The ESD event may have caused a metal melt, junction breakdown, or oxide failure. The device's circuitry is permanently damaged, causing the device to stop functioning totally or at least partially. The second ESD failure is latent failure. This is when a device is exposed to an ESD event and is partially degraded, yet continues to perform its intended function. Because of this, a latent effect is still difficult to identify. Still, the operating life of the device may be reduced. You cannot see, hear, or feel ESD unless it has the potential of 2000 to 3000 volts. Sensitive devices could be damaged with just 100 volts or less. You experience nothing, but the device is destroyed. Electrostatic charge is commonly created by the contact and separation of two materials. For example, a person walking across the floor generates static electricity as shoe soles contact and then separate from the floor surface. pulling off a piece of tape involves charge generation. An electronic device sliding into or out of a bag, magazine, or tube generates an electrostatic charge as the device's housing and metal leads make multiple contacts and separations with the surface of the container. Creating electrostatic charge by contact and separation of materials is known as triboelectric charging. It involves the transfer of electrons between materials. Which material loses electrons and which gains its electrons will depend on the nature of the two materials. The material that loses electrons becomes positively charged, while the material that gains electrons is negatively charged. What causes ESD? The first cause of ESD is people. When a person walks across a floor or moves with a chair, an electrostatic charge accumulates in their body. These movements can result in up to 1,000 volts measured on the human body. Simple contact or proximity of a finger to an ESD-sensitive device or assembly can allow the body to discharge and could possibly cause ESD damage to products. Other charged materials in bodies, insulative materials, commonly plastics, can generate very strong electrostatic fields. If we handle ESD-sensitive devices in the presence of an electrostatic field, there is a risk of ESD damage. Ungrounding machine parts could also be charged and pose a risk for ESD-sensitive devices. The first way to prevent ESD damage is to handle electronic devices and assemblies only in ESD-protected areas. You open the sensitive device's static shielding packaging only inside the ESD protective area, or EPA, following the rules of EPA. EPAs can be as small as one table or as large as an entire room. The second way is to use your personal ESD control items. Your process defines the control items you use. Don't forget those that apply. Use your wrist strap, use shoe grounders on both feet, use ESD garment properly, and check your wrist strap and footwear regularly. Keep your work area static safe. Remove charge-generating materials such as common plastics. If an air ionizer is needed for your process, ensure that it is turned on and operating in the correct direction. Store and transport ESD-sensitive products properly. Use only applied containers and packaging materials. Always close containers completely. Never open ESD-sensitive product packaging unless it is inside of an EPA. Some other advice to prevent ESD damage includes: not only devices but assemblies are ESD sensitive. Don't allow anyone in an EPA without proper protection. Ground all surfaces and parts which make contact with the ESD's items. Always use approved materials and items inside the EPA. Now that you know what ESD is, we'll go over ProSun's electrostatic control procedure, the purpose of which is to identify, plan, and control the potential effects of ESD. Electrical assembly, test, inspection, and management personnel are to be aware of this procedure, its requirements, and practice ESD. Warehouse, production control, shipping, and their management personnel are to be aware of this procedure, its requirements, and the practice ESD controls whenever handling, moving, storing, packaging, or shipping. Production personnel are to be aware of this procedure, its requirements, and practice ESD controls whenever applicable. They are to be especially aware when working around unprotected or partially assembled units in their work areas. Engineering, R&D, and service personnel are to be aware of this procedure, its requirements, and practice ESD controls whenever applicable. They are to be especially aware when working around unprotected or partially assembled units in their work or test areas. ProSun's approved ESD equipment is the Desco 98132 and wristband. The Desco 98132 and wristband are shown below. We'll now go over the definitions of the terms you'll see in this document. ESD, which is the release of static electricity when two objects come into contact. ESDS, which is electrostatic discharge sensitive. EPAs, which are electrostatic protective areas. ASL, which is approved supplier listing. Common point ground, which is a system or method for connecting two or more grounding conductors to the same electrical potential. Desco 98132, which is a calibrated AC outlet analyzer and wristband tester, and the Fluke 115, the calibrated multimeter. Grounding is especially important to effective ESD control. An ESD grounding should be clearly defined and regularly evaluated. All purchase of ESDS devices shall be made from the approved supplier listing only. The ASL shall provide electrostatic shielding or charge dissipation containers to ensure the proper transportation of ESDS devices. All ProSun employees handling ESDS components must be properly grounded. All ProSun workstations that handle the ESDS components must be grounded. ProSun uses ESD Association Standards ANSI/ESD S6.1 as a guideline. This standard is a two-step procedure for grounding ESD protective equipment. The first step is to ground all components of the work area to the common point ground marked clearly in the workstations. The ESD common point ground is properly identified with the symbol below. The second step is to connect the common point ground to the equipment ground or the third wire electrical ground connection. Connecting the ESD control materials or equipment to the equipment ground brings all components of the workstation to the same electrical potential. ESD equipment inspection. All environment control systems in the workstation that handle ESDS components or devices will be inspected to verify that the system, including necessary equipment, is adequate and functioning properly. The required verifications are as follows. Daily, you will turn on the DESCO 98132 at the workstation, plug in the wrist strap, touch strap to the ground, and press test. If the indicator is green, then the strap is verified. An operator wearing the wrist strap touches the test plate, and if green illuminates, the operator is grounded. If either strap or connection to operator is faulty and does not give a green light, then dispose of the wrist strap, get a new one from supervisor, and repeat the test. The operator logs the daily test in the grounding verification inspection log. If the workstation is not manned or used for ESD products during any period, the above daily test is not required. Until the next time the workstation is activated for use requiring electrostatic controls. As per designated employee's job checklist, the ESD logs will be reviewed to ensure that they are being completed as needed and ensure that the log page is not full. If log is nearly full, then the designated employee will remove the log, scan it into the designated location on the server, and replace the station with a blank log sheet. Grounding, inspection, and verification log. Quarterly, the DESCO 98132 AC outlet will be verified and validated on a quarterly basis using the Fluke 115 multimeter. The test plate grounding on the DESCO 98132 AC outlet and wristband testers will be measured to the ground and the resistance in ohms recorded on the grounding verification inspection log. The test will be considered passed and verified if the reading on the Fluke 115 is less than 1 ohms. Annually, the DESCO 98132 AC outlets are calibrated by a third-party certified laboratory. Calibration certification is kept on file. Controlling static on personnel and moving components. Wrist straps will be worn by all ProSun personnel handling ESDS components. The wrist strap will keep the person wearing it near ground potential. Static charges will be safely dissipated from the person to the ground and will not accumulate when the right strap is worn properly. The ESD wrist straps are 1 meg ohm resistor type and will be measured with a multimeter from the wrist strap button to the verified grounding connector point on a periodic basis and recorded in the grounding and verification inspection log. All workstations handling ESDS components have floor mats in their area. The floor mats allow employees handling these components to move around their stations to complete their assigned work. All workstations where ProSun personnel use a desk or table to handle ESDS components has an ESD protective work surface properly connected to the common ground point. A sample of the workstation is shown below. All ESDS components must be properly packaged and kept within their packaging to protect from their electrostatic discharge. These components must be handled by employees trained to handle ESDS components. An employee receiving the ESDS device or component from the warehouse shall keep the device in the packaging it was shipped in to transport it to their workstation. Once they reach the workstation, the employee should ground themselves using the verified grounded wrist straps before opening and removing the component. If the employee has to leave their workstation, they should return the component or device to its shipping box, or place it on the mat on the floor or the ESD protective work surface. All ESD work areas and ESDS components must be properly identified. The work areas will be identified with the label that advises you that you are entering into a static safeguarded work area. All ESDS components or areas that store ESDS components will be identified with a caution label that advises that these are static sensitive devices. This label advises that you should not handle these components unless you are properly grounded or it may result in damage from ESD. The ESD common point ground will be identified by the label shown previously in each workstation. When receiving, ensure all materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels are handled, protected, stored, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in this procedure. When inspection and testing, ensure all materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels plus assemblies or subassemblies containing ESDS components are handled, protected, stored, assembled, tested, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in this procedure. Tested components are to be repackaged in ESD protective covers and labeled as ESD sensitive components per this procedure. When in warehouse and storeroom, ensure materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels are handled, protected, stored, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in the procedure. For assembly, ensure all materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels plus assemblies or subassemblies containing ESD sensitive components are handled, protected, stored, assembled, tested, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in this procedure. For R&D, ensure all materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels plus assemblies or subassemblies containing ESD-sensitive components are handled, protected, stored, assembled, tested, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in this procedure. Tested components are to be repackaged in ESD protective covers and labels as ESD-sensitive components per this procedure. For field service, ensure all materials identified with ESD packaging and or labels plus assemblies or subassemblies containing ESD-sensitive components are handled, protected, stored, assembled, tested, and moved using appropriate ESD practices as defined in this procedure.